Things looking green today as crypto prices make their return from the abyss. We haven't yet recovered from last week's dump yet. And some are saying that we might even return to red. But as it is now, we're making a comeback. But if you look at the month chart, things have been so good in July that even last week's dump haven't completely erased the greens, right? So a lot of these tokens are still in significant greens following July. Look at H bar, still at 60% from the success it experienced in July. Okay. Now, there's a lot of macro events happening at the moment and a lot of sentiment. I've seen some analysts even say that we might now experience a relatively red August, which wouldn't be too surprising considering the things that are going on right now. Now, the thing with crypto is this: even if the charts are looking good, even if, all fundamentals are pointing towards a pump, a success, things going up, everything is going well, there are what I call gray swan events, not necessarily black swan events, gray swan events that happen that kind of drag everything down. And regardless of fundamentals or what have you, these events will always bring everything down. And when they happen, they cause a slump across the field, right? And a lot of it is to do, for instance, with the economy of the United States at the moment, the, back and forth between President Trump and various departments with Jerome Powell. A lot to do also with actually the economy, nothing to do with Trump, right? The jobs reports and what people think the Federal Reserve is going to do. So July passed and we didn't get the cut that was supposed to be guaranteed. And this spooked the heck out of the investors, and a lot of them are selling, right? They sold off and are still selling off. In fact, there are some ETF outflows that are causing a bit of a sort of downward pressure on the price of Bitcoin, right? So in July, there were record inflows. And because of all the FUD in the system, you can imagine a lot of investors are looking to secure some of those gains that they experienced in July. So, a lot of outflows happening with ETFs. And this is the thing with ETFs, right? Because there's so much money in it now, right? And we have large, colossal organizations like BlackRock and Fidelity involved. The amount of money that they can move has a big influence on the price of Bitcoin now. It's not like the good old days where, there's a lot more input from whales and stuff like that. Now, some of those whales now don't even have the capacity to move Bitcoin like the likes of Microstrategy or BlackRock can, right, with their ETFs. But I guess we can say that they are the new whales, right? The big killer whales and orcas in the sea are now the establishment banks because they've amassed so much Bitcoin that they can do this, right? So much so that there are now people warning about Bitcoin price falling to $100,000 each or even lower. But when I see people say these things, I have a look at who actually said it. They predict it could fall back to 100,000 levels amid mounting macro headwinds, right? Which is, a lot of things happening with global catastrophes, global wars and stuff. There's more actually going on in terms of macro events than, Israel and Iran. There's stuff going on, obviously, in Ukraine and Russia. But there's also Cambodia. Is it Cambodia and Thailand or something like that? And all sorts of, activities kicking off everywhere. Hayes recently sold over 13 million in crypto assets. So this is a bit where you have to take with a pinch of salt and think about the conflict of interest. So these guys have sold and now they're warning us that it might fall. Is this a kind of wish that it might fall so that they can buy back? So, all of this so-called analysts and professionals and stuff, man, you got to take into consideration that a lot of the things that they say and they put out into the ecosystem may be an attempt to manipulate the price of what they're talking about in the first place. So if I am a big organization like this and I've sold 13 million worth of crypto, of course I would talk it down. I don't want it to go up. I want it to go down. So I would have made the right decision and I'd have the opportunity to buy back in. Again, I consider this FUD and I consider this kind of relatively disingenuous, even though it's based on a possible scenario. based on all the macro events. But as we know, Bitcoin, the whole purpose of it is actually to do well and thrive amidst macro events that are not so favorable. It's supposed to be something that a lot of people flee to from traditional money when times are hard, times are uncertain, and people are looking for a more stable currency, or money rather, to have their wealth stored into, right? I'm not surprised that they're saying this. They sold their crypto, okay? They sold their bags. While they're selling, we have, of course, Microstrategy, who is not only buying, but they're targeting 7% of the total supply of Bitcoin. Now, that's a huge amount, right? And they have their eyes firmly placed in the future. Do you think Microstrategy is listening to Arthur Haynes? No, they're not. They've got their own strategy because they've got their own insights. They've got their own knowledge of the system. They understand that Arthur Haynes is playing the system the same way they are. Now, will Microstrategy love it for Bitcoin to fall over 100,000? Of course, they would, which means they can buy even more with the money that they have. And trust me, they will buy even more with the money that they have. But if it doesn't fall, Microstrategy is not going to stop buying because 7%, okay, which is a lot. And they know that this is the only time that they can do it. If the price of XRP, I was going to say, if the price of Bitcoin rises to 200,000, 300,000, 500,000, it becomes more and more difficult to achieve that goal, okay? But the likes of BlackRock can still do it, right? BlackRock can do that at a 1 million 1 million Bitcoin price. BlackRock can still do it. Fidelity can still do it because they control so much money and they have so many investors buying into their ETFs that they could accumulate pretty much at any price. So the likes of MicroStrategy and Michael Saylor are, the whales that won't stop whaling. By the way, I thought they changed the name to Strategy. I don't know why it's still MicroStrategy on this. Anywho, another insight is countries, right? So countries that have infinite resources are also accumulating. And the likes of France are now, a party in France anyway, are now suggesting to start mining Bitcoin with some of their nuclear facilities. I'm telling you, miners, right, they're not going to be able to compete with miners of the future. Now, miners have been successful up until now because the difficulty of mining Bitcoin up until now has been much easier than it will be in future, right? Most of Bitcoin has been mined. The little amount of Bitcoin left is going to require more and more and more energy to do, more and more and more difficult algorithms, which means they're going to need more powerful machines, more powerful GPUs, which, massive organizations that have infinite resources, like countries that have nuclear energy plants, are going to be the only ones that can mine Bitcoin eventually. And the price of Bitcoin, obviously, when that happens, is going to skyrocket because already we're going to have the OTC stash run out. We're going to get demand from countries and companies and organizations and financial institutions that want to buy Bitcoin and rich individuals, right? Billionaires that want to buy Bitcoin as store of value. And they're only going to be able to buy it from the market. And, individuals, billionaires probably can't mine Bitcoin because they don't have the resources, right? But you have countries like France who are going to be able to, dedicate one of their nuclear plants to mining Bitcoin. We have people trying to mine Bitcoin with volcanoes and all sorts of things, right? And it's only a matter of time before even the United States starts doing something similar to this if they're not doing it already. What about XRP? Well, the sentiment around XRP is still sky high, even though the price is hovering around $3, which I think actually is quite good, taking into consideration the catastrophic macro environment that we are in at the moment. There are newspapers and analysts and stuff that still think XRP is an amazing investment and they can't believe that people can't see it. XRP is the best $500 investment in crypto today, quoted from American newspaper USA Today. Now, they go on to talk about how XRP and some other crypto tokens, of course, are much better as an investment than stocks and will definitely outperform them by orders of magnitude. And of course, it mentions the fact that meme coins and smaller microcaps will vastly outperform the likes of XRP because of its large market cap already. But the upside versus the risk, of course, is what balances out. In terms of traditional investment, most people in old traditional investment would not touch anything that behaves like a meme coin with a 75,000 inch pole. But XRP now is perceived as a stable investment and has an incredible upside compared to other equally stable investments in traditional finance. And of course, with Ripple's acquisition or eventual acquisition of the banking license and the name Ripple associated with XRP has gained, gaining more and more sort of kudos in that environment, that traditional money environment. XRP is now continuously being perceived as a good investment. Now, we already know this, obviously, which is why we preempted them by many, many years. But now that institutional money is getting more and more comfortable with recommending XRP, I think that when the tide turns, which is probably sooner rather than later, we're going to see the said God candles that we've been waiting for this whole time. Not financial advice. Do your own research, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.